to In Broken Windows. I think Josmar is going to tell us a little bit about broken windows as a concept and some other things. So if you'll go for it.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm honored to start this off, especially not only with people on the panel, but even just people out here in the audience who are doing such amazing work. Some of my heroes I see in the audience tonight. Broken Windows, the reason and Coalition and Broken Windows is a coalition of 12 groups, ranging from people who do cop watch to immigration groups, immigrant rights groups. We chose to focus on broken windows because of the effect that it has on so many people's lives, from Black and Latinos to homeless people to just generally vulnerable populations in the city. So we chose to focus obviously on broken windows, not so much as a specific policing policy. Some people might remember stop and frisk and the battle over that tactic during the Ray Kelly and Mayor Bloomberg administration. But broken windows as a philosophy, as an ideology, that really has its roots back 20 years ago, if not further. So for those who are not aware of Broken Windows and its origins, it started as an article in a magazine in the Atlantic Monthly in 1982, actually the year I was born. And from that article was posited a theory that said that if you focused on signs of disorder in neighborhoods and you really put law enforcement to monitor and diminish those signs of disorder, which could be homelessness, which could be panhandling, which could be just someone begging, urinating on the sidewalk, any types of small levels of disorder. But if you focused on these things, that you could prevent bigger things. And that had some kind of common sense appeal to it, because like a lot of us, I like to tell my kids, gotta take care of the little things too. But the theory kind of took off from that article and was pushed around by the authors of the theory were James Q. Wilson and George Kelling. And they pushed it out there to become a policing kind of manifesto. And when Commissioner Bill Bratton, who was here about 20 years ago under Rudy Giuliani, they operationalized that idea and they made it into something like the New York City Police Department, which has a really big platform, right? It's the most important, the most powerful, the most kind of well-known police department in the world. The New York City Police Department really turned towards that, and we saw numbers of misdemeanor arrests skyrocket. The focus on these kind of behaviors went up, and Bratton and Giuliani kind of made that kind of their signature style of policing. And before Broken Windows was kind of put into function, crime was already starting to decline. Now there's a lot of debate over what the reasons were. I've heard reasons from the end of the crack era, which makes a lot of sense. I think people remember the crack era as being a time when there was a lot of violence, and when that era ended, violence went down with it. I've heard stories, people have written stories about like the lead that was in paint, that could have contributed to lower numbers of violence. But there was no consensus. But Commissioner Bratton, Rudy Giuliani politically took their implementation of Broken Windows and they took the credit of that crime decline with them. And so Broken Windows became a celebrated theory that had indeed saved the city from itself, saved the city from all the violence. And the numbers kept going down. And so people looked around and said, this must be what really saved us. And so since then, Broken Windows has enjoyed tons and tons of accolades from not only politicians, but the media, who've also credited with Giuliani and his style, and Bratton with his Broken Windows as really having solved crime for New York City. Problem with that is that research, social research, hasn't really backed that up. And Bratton will admit it himself. He'll say, there's not research that unequivocally draws that conclusion that there's a relationship between broken windows and lower levels in crime. But sometimes that doesn't matter. I think politically, it was put out there that this was the best way to police, and so it became not only gospel in New York, but it was exported to other urban cities across America, all the way from New York to Los Angeles. So broken windows wasn't just a New York phenomenon, it became a national kind of policing. It became, I would say, the most well-known or the most important policing philosophy in America. Fast forward to July of last year, when Eric Garner, was out in front on the street, allegedly selling Lucy cigarette, because it's untaxed. That's a sign of disorder, right? There's selling of something kind of somewhat illegal or illicit. People on that neighborhood will actually say he wasn't actually even selling Lucy at the time. He was actually breaking up a fight. But we came to see that interaction as a kind of flashpoint of what broken windows had become, or what broken windows was for the last 20 years, which was this way for police officers to be in the lives of everyday New Yorkers, poor New Yorkers, working class New Yorkers. I've been arrested for having a foot up on a subway seat at like 1 o'clock in the morning when I was trying to get home. Little signs of nonviolent but disorderly behaviors as a way for police officers to stop you. And that's really the way I've come to understand it, not as a real efficient policy, but as a way to put police officers in the lives of New Yorkers at a time when crime was going down, and so there was less of maybe a justification for it. So the groups that work in our coalition and that organize around this have really made it their point to highlight this, not just as a policy, but as a time for us as New Yorkers and America, because broken windows is being talked about in Los Angeles. It was talked about in Ferguson, Missouri, because there was also kind of low-level interactions with the police. And it's become a real kind of question for the nation. But New York in particular, because broken windows was born here, the idea took flight here. And so people in the groups in our coalition here in New York feel more of a responsibility to take it on here, and our goal is to put the broken windows era behind us and completely put that theory to bed as a theory that was not proven by social research, but also two, as an extension of and really more of stop and frisk to us was just the tip of the iceberg, and broken windows represents a lot of that unexplored iceberg that was underneath the surface, and to really unpack a lot of not only the politics, but of the damage done to people who are criminalized by it, who have to pay real consequences with it. And so we're focused to really bringing voice to these people, whether they be Eric Garner, people like Eric Garner, but also people who are perhaps sometimes without voice, immigrants, undocumented people, young people, people who perhaps have even less of a stake than some of the people we've dealt with. Homeless New Yorkers are facing a lot of interactions and harassment by the NYPD today during the de Blasio administration. So this is something that I think is an important question, and I hope tonight we can add to that.
Thank you. So we're gonna keep going down the panel.